But speaking of the playoffs, when we
Yeah.
think about SEC play, we had a game that came on at 12:45. It was on ESPN network once, or SEC network once again. Missouri versus Vanderbilt. Missouri came into the season with playoff aspirations and playoff goals, and Vanderbilt was in their way, right? This was probably the closest game of the day. And so this game left a lot to be desired on both sides, but also left us with a lot of key takeaways. So for you, Hunter, Missouri versus Vanderbilt, what were some of the things you were thinking about while watching it?
While watching it, so going into it and leaving the game, I think what a lot of people are thinking of is, okay, maybe Missouri's not as good as we were giving them credit for. And I think there's also a conversation about maybe Vanderbilt's better than we thought they were. And I think in this game, it's a little bit of both. So I don't want to jump down Missouri's throat and say, hey, you guys should have won this game by 30 or 20 or anything like that. I think that Missouri made some mistakes offensively. They made a lot of mistakes on the coaching side of the ball, and we can talk more about that. And Vanderbilt played well. Like, they put an offensive game plan together that just gave them some problems and helped Vanderbilt move the ball. I don't think that Missouri should have dropped as far as they did following a win in the SEC game. They dropped 4 spots. They beat BC, a ranked team. They're 4-0. They dropped 4, but we have Penn State, who had a close game with Bowling Green, ahead of them. Oregon, who had a close game with Idaho in week 1, 3-point game with BYU, but they're ahead of them, even though those are non-conference games.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I thought the drop to me wasn't warranted. I don't know if it's just a mixture of what people expected Missouri to do against Vanderbilt or what they believed Vanderbilt should be, and what, like, again, back to like what they think Missouri should do against a team like Vanderbilt and who they are from the past. But if that is what they're thinking, I mean, Vanderbilt has, if you've watched the games, has shown us that they're not that same team of the past, and they have someone like Diego Pavia who is dominating both in the passing and on the rushing game, and their defense has certainly improved from last year. For Missouri, I don't think that they deserve to be like the lowest ranked undefeated team before the rankings start to point to teams with 1 loss, like Michigan underneath them. There are other undefeated teams underneath them, but Missouri being at number 11 just doesn't feel right to me, given some of the competition that we've seen Miami play, right? They've realistically only played Florida, and then of course they played USF last week, but other than that, they played FAMU and they've played Ball State. They've looked really impressive. I do think Missouri has taken on the task of scheduling tougher teams with BC, and Vanderbilt having a respectable win against VT. So I didn't really understand the drop all the way there, just given like what we think of in terms of Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and I don't want to play the shoulda, coulda, woulda. I mean, had Vanderbilt beat Georgia State last week, would they have dropped as much in a close game like this if it was a 3-0 Vanderbilt team? I think people are, like you mentioned, too quick to think of this Vanderbilt team as Vanderbilt last year, the year before, bottom of the SEC team, whereas they're showing that they have something different.
Yep.
And they mixed it up on Missouri, where this game kind of got to this point for me was some of the coaching issues with Missouri. I know Drink's your guy, so I don't want to talk too down on him, but there were some tough decisions from a coaching standpoint. They kicked it on 4th and 2 twice in the game.
Yep.
The first one being right there, you're 7 yards out. And, I get it. You're playing a close game. It's an SEC opponent. But at this point in the game, Nate Noel had 75 yards.
Yeah.
He's running it down their throat. It's 3rd and 2. Give him the ball twice.
Give him the ball twice.
Get in the end zone. You have the guys. And that was the first big coaching issue. I get why you kick it later. But then to go for it, or to go for it there, to end the half and give them points, that's a 6-point swing.
Yep. It's a massive swing, and I think that them going for it there and Vanderbilt stopping them, and going into half with that 13-7 lead changed, or I think 13, it might have been 13-10 or 13-7, but either way they had 13 points. Changed 13-10. They changed the dynamic of the game. And, what we saw from Missouri that I was impressed by was the dominant run game. You saw that big 64-yard run in the first half from Nate Noel. He finished the game with 199 yards rushing. So, like, explosive run game. Where I was impressed with Vanderbilt was their ability to slow down the passing game. You look at the stat sheet, and Luther Burden finished 2 touchdowns. That second touchdown came in overtime. And for Brady Cook, he had 226 yards, so that was his lowest yard total of the season. All within that 220 to 230 range, but it looked like when Missouri needed big plays, they were slowed down and forced to kick field goals. That's not going to work, I believe, with some of the tougher competition upcoming for them. It worked in this game. And there were just some mistakes on the Vanderbilt side, right? The kicker, he made, I think, a 55 and a 57-yarder, but he missed a 50-yarder and he missed a 30, 35-yard chip shot in OT to tie the game. So Missouri won the game, but there's a lot of things that Vanderbilt did to lose the game as well to put them in that position.
Yeah, and Diego Pavia, 14 for 23, 178 yards. He did it on the ground. Where they haven't really established themselves as solid passing team. You said it last week, he can pass the ball, but it's not their strong suit. And I don't think it all falls on him. I think it falls on the talent he has around him. We wondered that going into the year. Do they have enough weapons? They had 4 drops this week. He had 7 balls batted at the line, which is a little bit more on him, but also on his O-line. They were able to work the tight end into this game. So, Stowers there, 7 catches. They're trying to figure out their passing identity.
Yep.
But I think that Missouri still did enough to stop that. If you can give a team only 20 points, going into the game, usually that's enough to win. You put up more than that, that's usually enough to win. So, I want to see from Missouri going forward a little bit more consistent play out of Brady Cook. We talked about the inability to throw the deep ball. He had that one, and I don't think it's all on him. He had that one right there to end the half that Luther Burden dropped, and that could have been a huge swing in the game because it led to 3 points for Vanderbilt. But if they would have got that, they're in field goal range, looking to score. They had time, 20 seconds left. So, only 40% completion on balls over 10 yards from Brady Cook. So going forward for Vanderbilt, for Missouri, they need to establish a little bit more variety in the passing game and not just rely on Nate Noel because he's kind of carrying them offensively.
Yeah, and again, you see what Burden is able to do. I think he had like a 20-yard touchdown in the first half, and he just needs a little bit of separation, and he can just kind of hit the corner faster than you. Would like to see the ball in his hands more. You saw what he did on that punt return as well. Kind of filling it out for about 20 yards, and then I think in this game it just became we're just going to out athlete them. Like the touchdown he had in overtime was just him just going on a streak and just look, I'm more athletic than you are. That probably will work in some SEC games, and it worked in this game. But just the consistency is what we, or at least what I believe, will take Missouri from just a fringe playoff team to a true contender in this conference. Because there's a lot of talent here. Like if you listen to our previews, you listen to the shorts, right? This offensive line is solid. I think the PFF team had 3 of the offensive linemen in their top 5 for PFF grades this past week, just based upon how Missouri blocks. And then if you just want to see more from the passing, as you mentioned, on the defensive side, they didn't truly slow down them in the rushing game. Again, we talked about what Pavia was able to do, 84 yards on the ground, and that option's tricky. They probably are not going to see the option the rest of the season, besides maybe Alabama. They'll run a little bit of option, but that's just not something you're traditionally playing against. And so I think if I'm in Nashville, that feels like a good game. I really feel for Brooks Taylor, the kicker. But I think for Brock Taylor, but from a Missouri perspective, you got out, you won. Drink was able to keep his composure, so I'm gonna speak positively about my boy Drink. He was able to keep his composure. You could tell he was sweating, but you get out with a win, and you know where your holes are at. You saw it last game, and you have a bye week, and yet to prepare before you play Texas A&M to continue to build upon those areas of opportunity.
You mentioned their option defense and Alabama kind of being that next test for them on the option side of the ball. I mean, depending on what Oklahoma does at quarterback, they had Hawkins come in, not to skip ahead, but, a guy like that, if they start to develop the offense around him, that's another team Missouri could see with a quarterback that can move with his legs. They do play South Carolina, Arkansas. They'll probably see Marcel Reed next week. So while they're not building game plans around those guys like they have for Pavia, That's going to be a huge thing for Missouri going forward. But both these teams, based on what they maybe necessarily didn't do well in this game, the next test for these teams is going to be the bigger test. Missouri unable to really establish efficiency in the passing game. They're playing Texas A&M, who's been able to get to the quarterback a little bit, put some of that pressure. That's going to be a big test for Missouri. Vanderbilt having the week off before Alabama.
Yeah.
We know how that can be. That there's a lot of pressure on Vanderbilt.
How can that be? How can that be?
It can be a tough game playing Alabama. I mean, Vanderbilt going to be at home. I went to an Alabama Vanderbilt game at Vandy one time. It was fun. It's a good test for both these teams. They have bye week. I was happy for this game. I think Vanderbilt played a little better than they could have. I think Missouri played a little worse than they could have. But all in all, I don't think that Missouri deserves to be demoted as much as they have been based on this game.
Absolutely. And I think, if you listen to what Nick Saban has said about the toughest places to play in the SEC, he had, positive remarks for every team besides Vanderbilt. And I think it was just because it becomes a road game for them, because everyone loves Nashville, right? But bringing it back to this particular game, I agree. I think, like I said, Vanderbilt, if I'm a fan, I would feel good about this game. You support your kicker. Your defense looks solid. They made stops when they needed to. The offense was driving, and Pavi is a playmaker. You got a guy like that who is going to give you everything each week. You rally around dudes like that. Langston Hughes at linebacker, or Langston Patterson at linebacker, he's a playmaker, right? You have these guys that clearly show. You talked about Stowers as well. I'm looking at this roster, hopefully the portal doesn't come at them, because these are talented guys who can actually play and are hanging in these games. And it makes me think of if that was Auburn on their chest, I don't think that people would penalize Missouri for how close this game was. I really do think that Vanderbilt is a different team this year, despite the Georgia State loss. And it's a little bit of brand awareness, I think, here when it comes to the perception.
Yeah.